Welcome to Eastown Online. My name is Clint Dupin, and we're so thankful that you joined with us this week. I don't know, maybe you're listening from your car, you're watching on Sunday morning, or maybe you're getting caught up sometime during the week. Whatever it may be, you're on YouTube or you're on Facebook. I would just challenge you, share this link because I believe today is going to be absolutely game changing. It really, really will be. So I'm excited to start this series, to continue this series. We're in our second week of Love Local. And today we're talking a little bit more, what does it mean to love where you work? Now, here's something I want to just remind you of. If you are newer to Eastown, maybe you've been watching online for a month or two, or maybe this is your first week. I want to challenge you to get connected. And you simply can do that by picking up your phone right now, simply texting Eastown to 94000. And we have these amazing Eastown mugs that we would love to send you one, just to remember us, just to connect with you, and just to share a little bit more about what we do here at Eastown. And another way you can find out what we do at Eastown, if you've never downloaded our app, you can do that as well, Eastown Church. That'll keep you up to speed. You can follow us on social media, whether it's Instagram or it's Facebook. We'll always be sharing what is going on. Now, just a couple of things so that you know. Next week, right, if you are watching today on a Sunday, next week, I'm going to be interviewing Derek Carr, and we're talking about how do I love where I play, right? It's like, now, not all of us play in the NFL, but we do play. We have our social groups. We take our kids to the soccer games. What does it mean to make an impact and to have an impact where we play? And so we're going to kick it off that way so you will want to be here and be present. Now, if you never joined us in person, I would challenge you to do that, right? Maybe start next week. We meet at 10 a.m. at Iron Horse School in San Ramon. And I'll tell you what, we have people from all over the East Bay. So if you're in the East Bay area, I always say this, join us in the room. It's always better in the room than online, right? And so maybe next week is that big step for you. So we are in our second week, right? We are in our second week of talking about Love Local. And last week, we talked about how do I love where I live. This is something I am so passionate about. This is kind of like how we built Eastown, how we started Eastown. It's like, hey, we want a great Sunday morning that's great, where we come together, we worship together, it's community, all blah, 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 right? But we really believe the impact isn't gonna be made on Sunday morning. It's gonna be where you live, right? We have this whole slogan, it's like, start where you live, right? God has placed you strategically right where he wants you. Whether you're single and you're in a condo or an apartment, you have a family, you live in a house or in a neighborhood, or you're in the city, wherever it is, like, we are to love our neighbors. Now you're like, I love my neighbor on the right, but my neighbor on the left, he's kind of a weirdo. Well, guess what? He thinks the same thing about you, or she does, whatever. It's like, I don't care, right? It's like, we are commanded to love, right? Even if you're not a believer or follower of Jesus, one of the things that we need to be doing is to love each other, especially in the day and age in which we live. So Gabe Garcia, one of our church planters in Oakland, our partner church plant, New City Church, he kicked us off last week and he talked all about this concept of pray, watch, and bless. Pray, watch, and bless. If you missed it, you can go back and listen to it or watch it. But he talked about this idea of, he has this list on his phone where he met over 200 people his first year in Oakland. And one of the things that he committed to was praying for each of those people, naming them, right, in his prayers, and then watching, like, what is it? Where do they have a need, and how can I help meet that need, even if it is just prayer? And we gave this out in person. I wanted to show you this. It's kind of a challenge, and it says, you are here. So where, maybe you live in a neighborhood, apartment, condo, is you have people all around you. And I often challenge people, it's like, do you know your neighbors? Well, I know Bob, right? It's always a Bob. I know Bob, but I don't know that person. I might know their first name. Well, do you know their full name? Do you know their last name? Do you know what they like to eat for dinner? Do you know where they work? Do you know what needs they have? Like, the challenge just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. It's hard to love our neighbors if we don't know who they are, or what they care about, or what they love, or what they believe, and where they've come from, and what their story is all about. And we gave this out. Not because we want people to be projects, not because we want them to do what we want them to do, get our agenda across. We said, hey, what if we pass these out? What if we put these in a place to remind us, like, I need to get to know my neighbors. I need to really love my neighbors. And so if you want one of those, you can text us right now, or you can just simply message us in the message bar in Facebook or YouTube. We'd love to get you one of these just as a reminder. So we often talk, let's talk about this week. We often talk about the fact that we are strategically placed by God on purpose in the spaces we spend our time, where we live, where we work, and where we play. Now, this week is building upon last week, expanding our opportunity to love local in the workplace. Now, think about it. We spend a huge portion of our week in the workplace, don't we? Not just accomplishing our role, but working beside others to achieve a common goal. We believe that you are in that space with each person that works beside you on purpose. Whether you love your job or dislike it or even dread it, God can use you in the lives of those around you. I know for some of you are thinking like, you don't understand my manager. Clint, you can't begin to know what my boss does. Like maybe not, right? Maybe in a way it's like you feel like you're disrespected or you're slighted. It's like, isn't it weird that we're still commanded to love? Now just pause. Like if you're in an abusive or toxic workplace, that's a different topic and that's a different thing. Get out, get help, do whatever you need to do. But a lot of times the things that we make us bitter or hate or just disgruntled, because a lot of times we don't get our way or people believe differently than we believe or they just don't act the way that we want them to act. We're commanded, we are taught to love, especially for those of us who are followers of Jesus. Not to love them to get them to do what we want, to love them because God commands us to love them. Love them because God loved us first. We fall short constantly, right? So, what would happen to our workplaces if we entered in looking for where God was moving and working? What if our posture changed for those we work with? Instead of being focused on ourselves, our career, our agenda, what if I approached my relationship with those that God has placed around me with intentionality? So today, we want to look at practical ways. This is going to be so good. Practical ways. So get your notebooks out, get your phones out. Practical ways to come with a posture of understanding, of learning and listening to others, because this might dramatically change the environment in which you spend the majority of your workday hours. Can you imagine if you could change that environment? We have the opportunity to remind ourselves today that each and every person that we come in contact with is a child of God. Woo! Isn't that funny? The person that you can't stand, the person that frustrates you, they're still a child of God. And I could believe, can you believe this? And I could be a part of helping them experience this tangible love that portrays that fact. Now, maybe you think that means it is your job to tell someone that they are a child of God. But today, we want you to know that learning people's stories, learning their backgrounds, learning their lifestyle that they may be living and loving them like Jesus would, could be the greatest way that you could ever communicate that. So today we have something very special. We actually have someone very special, one of my good friends, Danielle Hawthorne. And Danielle has been one of those people that has been so intentional about engaging in her workplace. So let's welcome Danielle. So we are here with Danielle Hawthorne, and I am so thankful for this moment. I really am.
I'm glad to be here too.
And even before the camera is turned on, you were sitting here educating me. You always are educating me on something.
Well, I've talked with Michael, and she's definitely told me.
Oh, you guys are conspirators.
Yeah.
I get it.
We got to stick together.
Hey, one thing we totally agree on is, and we agree on a lot of stuff.
We do.
Yeah. But one thing that we really agreed on was, if you're listening to this 2 weeks from now, it might not be as relevant, or a month from now. But the Super Bowl
it will always
halftime.
be relevant. It will always be relevant. It was amazing.
Yes.
Definitely one of the best Super Bowl shows, halftime shows ever.
What was your favorite?
The halftime show.
Oh, okay. But Because you're from where?
I'm from Compton, California.
Which she educated me that this is how, I just love the artists. Like, they were all amazing.
They were.
I didn't realize the set had such significance. I thought the set was amazing.
The set was amazing, and the set was significant places in Compton, California. So there was Tam's Burger, there was the City Hall from Compton, California, and other significant places.
Why is Tam's Burger such a significant place?
I mean, so there are these mom and pop burger shops all throughout Compton, California, and Tam's is just one of many. But for me, I used to go to Tam's growing up all the time and get burgers and fries with family and friends, and it was fun. Tam's, and then the other one that I always used to go to is Louis Burger.
Yeah.
And it's just a favorite. It's just a favorite spot to get good food, good greasy food that you can eat when you're young. I don't know if I can handle it now. But it's just like I don't know, it's just known to people in Compton, California.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we got to get to some questions here, but and we might have to cut some of this part. But so I had another question for you. Okay. All right. So it was all great.
Yes.
But let's be honest. I mean, I'm from Detroit.
Oh, boy.
And 8 Mile made an appearance. Somebody said, hey, this is as close as Detroit will ever get to the Super Bowl.
It's probably true.
Was Matthew Stafford and Eminem. And Stafford won. I celebrated.
Okay.
It was great. Mm-hmm. What was your favorite part of, like, I'm sure your kids were watching, like, what is mom doing right now? But what was your part you got really excited about?
I think it was just a celebration of a city that has come under such scrutiny for so long for its negative stereotypes and connotations. I mean, I've always known Compton, California to be a city of rich culture and history, of such diversity and such... like I said, for me, it's family. You know what I mean? It's a place of great faith for me. And so, like, seeing all of that on display in a way that the media has oftentimes portrayed to be otherwise, it was just, for me, a celebration of just so much beauty. And so, yeah, I loved it. I loved the music. I mean, I loved it. Dr. Dre and Snoop. I mean, it was just amazing.
It was great.
Kendrick Lamar. It was all just... It was amazing. Mike and I were sitting in our home. We were eating chips and salsa and guacamole. And as it was playing, we were dancing and like singing along at our favorite parts. It was awesome.
That's so cool.
It was awesome. It was great.
And I told you as you walked in today, I'm like, some people are making comments like, if you really enjoyed that, you're old. I was in a room full of middle schoolers and high schoolers, and they were going nuts. Especially most with Kendrick Lamar. Okay. Like, they really know Kendrick, and he's just such a lyricist, like, amazing. Anyways, we got to get started.
Okay, let's do it.
So I think you have been, probably in the last couple of years, been one of those people that has been so inspirational to me, and yes, challenging, obviously, but even just challenging from a distance. And I really believe you live your life differently, and you live your life. It's not even that it's differently. You live your life like you say you're going to live. And I think another thing is you love people like well, even when it's hard. And I know you've been through some different things in your life, and you would, and if we had more time, we could talk more about some of the past stories and the backstories. But for you to continue to love like you do, you do have the right to be like, you know what, I'm kind of just going to do my thing and just keep on moving. But I want people to get to know you a little and what you do now, but weave in your family too, like your Mike and the kids and stuff like that, and then what you do.
Sure. So, so I'm Danielle. I'm married to my wonderful husband, Mike. We got married during the pandemic, and so married in 2020. That's right. And we have 4 amazing kids, 2 that were born of my body and 2 that were born of my heart, Michael and Maya and Dana and Jade, and they're amazing, young adult in college, and then 3 in high school and middle school. And we live here right here in the community. And in my work, and also as a passion of mine, I'm a social justice advocate. I advocate for Black and brown folks. I advocate for Indigenous and people of color. I have a heart for women and children as well. And so in my work, what we do, I work for an organization called Code 2040, and we work to bring full representation to Black and Latinx technologists at all levels of tech. And I'm not a technologist, but what I love about the work that we do is that I believe that tech is the driving force of industry right now. It's the innovation economy. It leads at the forefront of how the world is changing and moving so fast and so quickly. And so part of the reason I got into this is because I believe that it's the leader. It's the leading industry right now, and what happens in tech really trickles into the other industries of our workforce. And so I believe that what we are doing in tech will impact other industries. And so I'm also passionate about education and healthcare. And so I believe that the work that we're doing right now in tech will eventually trickle into these other industries and impact work and the workforce and the way that we work, and the way that we look at Black and Indigenous people of color in the workforce in those other industries.
It is amazing. You just said so much too. It's like, I remember when we were first talking about what you do and where you work, I would love to do a whole interview with you on how we can be more educated for those of us who are maybe managers or owners or bosses. Like, there's so many things. You just said one thing the first night that we were talking about what you do. I'm like, I never even heard of that. I never even heard. And do you remember what it was?
No.
It was whiteboarding.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we can't even go into it.
Right.
But I'm like, I never even knew that was a thing. But we can talk more about that later.
We'll talk more about it later.
But what you do in your work is pretty amazing. And what we're talking about today with this series of Love Local is, how do I love the people where I work? Because let's be honest, the workplace is our new neighborhood, right? It's where we spend the majority of our time. We're going to interact with all different types of people, different beliefs, ethnicities, way we vote politically, all of those different things, lifestyles. Where do we even start? Like, how do we, I know that's pretty broad, but we're talking about loving where we work, right? It's like, a lot of, when I hear that as a follower, as a believer, it's like, some people interpret it as like, how do I share my faith in the workplace? But that's not what we're talking about. It's like, we first have to start with loving people. How do we do that?
You know, when we were talking about this earlier, I think the first thing that I shared with you, and I believe this to my very core, is we have to understand that first and foremost, people are deserving of our respect. They are humans, first and foremost, deserving of love and dignity. Before they are ever Christians, before they are ever anything else, they're humans. They're human beings, and we have to be able to see them as that before we see them as anything else. And so when I go into any environment, including my work environment, I make every effort to see people first as human beings, deserving of dignity, deserving of respect, deserving of worth and value, simply because they are humans. And then I build up from there. You know, how can I connect with them? How can I build relationship with them? What kind of relationship can I build? Where do we have commonalities? You know, where do we want a relationship to build from? And so in the workplace, it can be that, you know, I'm a manager and you're my direct report. It can be that we're coworkers trying to build a project together. It can be a number of things. But if we can't even agree that we're human beings deserving of value and dignity and respect, then we don't have any place to build from.
So this didn't just happen. Like, I mean, to hear you talk like that, and I think there's a part of it that, like, yeah, we know that, but how did you get to that place? How did your mom teach you that? Like, did you read that in a book? Like, how did you get to that place?
I mean, of course, I was raised to love people just like everybody else. And I have wonderful parents and family that set the example. I mean, I come from a line of family who were pastors, and I grew up in the church. And I think that was an important part of the foundation that was instilled in me. But I think more than that, I've lived a lot of life, you know what I mean? And I've had experiences in the workplace that have, you know, impacted me to get to where I am. And I've had some really good management experiences, and I've had some really bad ones. And I think the ones that have most significantly impacted me are the really bad ones. You know, I've had some horrible managers, and I think, you know, the horrible managers are the ones that you walk away and you're like, number one, I don't ever want to feel that way again. But number two, I don't want anyone else to feel that way. You know, and so for me, I walked away from a management experience where I had a horrible boss that significantly impacted how I chose to look at what it meant to manage other people, what it meant to have other people under my care and guidance, and what it meant to be managed so incredibly poorly. And so I left that experience determined not to have anyone feel the way that I felt, and also not to treat anyone that way.
Wow. Yeah, it's so often we learn from, whether it's our parent, where it's like, I don't want to do that because of how my parent showed, or a manager or a boss. Yeah. But oftentimes what we don't want to do, we end up doing just because that's how we were taught.
That's how we were taught. That's right. And that's what we've seen, right? And I think it's very easy to mimic the leadership that we see, right? Mm-hmm. But I think when you've experienced hurt and pain from bad leadership, you do have a choice, right? You can be really bitter and angry, and you can be vengeful. And I think I felt that. I'm human. I certainly felt that way. But I think I walked away from that and just was like, actually, that's just not. That's not how I want people to feel.
Yeah.
That's not how I want people to feel. That's
good. Mm-hmm. So this takes some work.
Yeah.
There has to be work.
Yeah.
And I don't know if these are two separate questions or if there's the same question, but what's the work that needs to be done?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the second question. What's the posture?
Yeah.
Because I think when we were talking about this, the one thing that hit me when you were talking, I'm like, wow, that's where I want to be. It's like when you talk about posture, what becomes our posture if we really want to love those people where we work? What becomes our posture?
I think it's people of faith. It's similar to kind of what we say when we're, in the church and in the body of Christ as servant leadership, right? Mm-hmm. It's a similar model to that. So in my current role, I'm the vice president of programs. And so I have a team of people that I manage. And when I started, it was just like one person, and my responsibilities grew, obviously. Mm-hmm. But coming out of, like I said, that bad management experience, I wanted to relearn what it meant to be a manager, and a different kind of manager, mm-hmm. right? And so I started to look at the managers who were doing it well in my organization. At the time, I was being managed by a really great manager who took the time to get to know me, who asked me what was my preference. You know what I mean? How do you want to receive feedback, mm-hmm. right? Under what conditions? Do you want to receive it in the moment? Would you like to receive it later? How do you want to be celebrated? She took the time to learn me.
Every day I want to be celebrated.
I want to be celebrated every day, right. I want to be celebrated with a raise, right?
Every day.
And cookies and
But
cake,
this is for real.
But this is real life.
She asked that.
She certainly asked that. She asked me about my management experience. Like, how were your previous managers? What were their experience? What was your experience with them like? Where do you want to go in your career? What skills do you currently have that you want, or what skills do you want to learn, right? She took the time to really understand who I was, what I needed, where I wanted to go, how I learned, mm-hmm. how I took in information. And I really took from that in order to be a good manager, and in order to be a good leader, you've got to learn your people. And you've really got to step off of this platform that managers tend to put themselves in, and you've got to posture yourself to be a student of your people. You've got to posture yourself to be a student to where you can learn and receive information that will help you actually lift them up. And that's what she did for me.
Isn't that crazy? It's like, it's totally against everything in us.
Absolutely.
It's either you take the mindset of, you're here to serve me.
That's what I was going to say.
Or I'm here to serve you. It's
That's
two
right.
different. You can't do both.
Exactly. And oftentimes we see managers use their employees as a tool to advance themselves, mm-hmm. right? And their roles in leadership. And what I really understood is that my job as a manager is really to help my team be the best that they can be. And I can trust that my manager is doing the same for me. And so I don't have to worry about having an agenda. I don't have to worry about moving my agenda forward when it comes to my mm-hmm. team. My manager has my back. My manager is looking out for me. So I can fully invest. I can fully trust. I can fully devote all of who I am into my team, giving them the feedback that they need to grow, helping to lift them up, giving them opportunity, shouting them out, giving them projects that challenge them, giving them the professional development tools that they need to move to the level that they want to be at. And it's been a beautiful relationship, especially during the pandemic, when what our people and what folks in general have needed most is care. It's care, right? I don't need to worry about whether or not the work is getting done, because I've built such a relationship with the folks on my team, and we've built that in our organization culture, that we can just care for people. We can care for them.
Yeah. This to me, like even as you're talking, is even more important now. And I want you to talk a little bit more about this. Is like it's even more important now since the mental health crisis is just, it's a crisis.
It is a crisis.
So this becomes how I mean, I think it's the obvious. It's more important, but how does it look now? How do we do that now? Because you've got your own job to do, plus managing all of this stuff, and like how do we care for people on a mental health level? Like what does that look like? Does that make sense? Is it?
It does.
Okay.
It does. And I think this is where relationship comes in, right? This is where care comes in. This is where having an environment in your work culture to where you know your team and you know the people around you and you've given them permission to know you comes in, right? You have created an environment where you can be vulnerable for your team and you've modeled that for them, right? So I'm not just asking that of them, I'm also giving them that. So if I'm asking them to share with me, or if I'm asking them permission to give them feedback, I'm also giving them permission to give me feedback as well, right? Danielle, I heard you say something in a meeting and it didn't hit me well. Can I give you some feedback on how that landed for me? Yes. Right? Because if I'm willing to invest in them, I've got to be willing to allow them to invest in me as a manager as well. So that when things like what's happened in our world over the last couple of years comes about, and I noticed that a team member who was normally vibrant and active and engaged in meetings starts to suddenly be quiet, take more sick days than they normally do, I have some insight into that. And I can reach out to them and ask, hey, is everything okay? And because we've built up a relationship over time, they trust me and they're able to be vulnerable with me and let me know if there's a problem and they need some help. Or I can utilize benefits of our organization to just give them the help that they need. I think the thing is that the mental health crisis, if you will, has been around. It's not anything new.
Yeah.
What it has done, it's pushed to the forefront all the ways in which our work environments and the systems that we have aren't enough. We need more than systems. We need people. We need people that care. We need people willing to step in and ask and offer to help. We need people willing to invest in people's lives and speak up and not just let that coworker drift off into the background and disappear into the silence. You know, we need people around us to notice us, right? To notice when we're behaving differently and be willing to say, I see you and I care and I want to help. Will you let me help?
That's so good. I was just talking to somebody today that was, I haven't seen in 2 years. They're part of Eastown and they're like, hey, we haven't been able to be there. We're going through all of this stuff at work. We're going through some stuff with our marriage. We're going through stuff with the kids. And like everything in me wanted to say, you need community, you need people, but they feel like what you just said is like, there's nobody. There's nobody that understands her. And I'm like, this is what the church should be, is that community for people. All right, so I know we don't have much more time.
Okay.
I want to do this. What's the work? I know I haven't asked probably 16 of the questions I gave to you.
It's okay.
But this is so good.
That's good.
What is the work we need to do? Like if we really, because I think for people, is right now, I've never been in a place like the Bay Area where I love it. It's so creative. I love that you're in impacting technology. I think we're in one of the most influential places in the world.
Yeah.
What goes on here impacts the whole world.
That's right.
So I think oftentimes we are so career focused and career minded.
Yeah.
And I hear something like this. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to be around that person very much longer because I'm waiting for that next gig, that next job. I got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I'm even thinking about moving to Texas, right? Or I'm thinking about doing this. It's like, I'm just trying to get mine. What's the work? Because that is reality. There's some people that just say, I can't afford to work here anymore. I can't do. What's the work that we need to do as humans to have an impact on our workplace?
Yeah. And I think you just spoke to it. It's look up. It's look up. I think our workforce in a lot of ways is just so inundated with the next thing. What's the next step in my career? What do I want to do next? Where do I want to go next? What's the next level that I want to get to? And what I would say is we weren't meant to just produce. We are called human beings for a reason. I believe that we were put on this earth to be in constant relationship with other people. And I think we often go into our work environments thinking, I wasn't hired for that, right? But the thing is, as believers in Christ and as people of faith, we are in constant contact with people all of the time. We have the opportunity to be with people all of the time. And our workplace is the place where we spend the most time of our day, other than our homes with our families. And we have an incredible opportunity to be in communication, in conversation, in relationship with the people around us. And so what I would say is, if you are not being in your work, you're missing out on a wonderful opportunity. I would say that the people on my job are amazing, creative, wonderful individuals that my life would not be what it is today without having met them and having them and giving them permission to impact my life the way they have. And I think they would say the same about me, that because we have been in community together, I have impacted their life. But there was a permission, there was consent that was given. We all chose to be impacted by each other. We chose to show up and be in community with each other. We choose to be vulnerable with each other every day. And during the pandemic, the community of our work culture and a community of each other is in a lot of ways what kept us afloat.
It's so good. What has been the hardest thing for you to embrace every single day, to say, I'm going to make an impact, I'm going to love the people where I work? What's been, maybe it's an example, maybe it's an illustration, what do you think is the greatest barrier for you personally to do that?
I think the greatest barrier for me is I oftentimes have to get out of my head. Right? This idea that being vulnerable and allowing myself to share openly with the people around me is going to cost me. They're not going to like me. They're going to judge me. They're going to think I'm weird. They're going to think I'm old. You know what I mean? They're going to think all of these things. And what I found is that every time I choose to be vulnerable and every time that I choose to entrust them and speak up, and open up, they hold that space with such tenderness and care.
Being vulnerable takes sacrifice, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And in the right space, vulnerability opens us up to such beauty in relationship with others.
Give me an example of vulnerability.
Oh my goodness. So it's created over time. So let me say that. I would not advise anyone just going in a situation.
Hey, everybody, here's where I am.
Right.
First day on the job.
Right. Use discretion, right?
Yeah.
Use your wisdom, build up to it in a way that's comfortable for you and, the right settings. But I think acknowledging that for me, at the beginning of the pandemic, acknowledging that at the beginning, working from home was really exciting and fun, but over time, I don't love it as much anymore. And that's hard because there are so many people who are like, I don't ever want to go back to the work office. And so being someone who says that in an environment where everybody is like anxious to stay home, and I'm the lone one that's kind of like, actually, I might enjoy being in an office because my home sometimes doesn't feel like home anymore because I'm always there. And the distinction between work and home gets fuzzy after a while. That's an example of being vulnerable.
That's good. Okay, we're way over time, but this is really good.
Okay.
You mentioned time 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
How do you know? Like, how do you know is not the right question. How long does this take? Like, because this takes time. It's over time. It's probably 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? It doesn't just happen.
It doesn't.
So I don't even know how to ask that question, but talk about time.
It does take time, right? But here's the thing. If we think about all of the fruitful, life-giving relationships in our life, they took time as well, right? And so we don't get into, meaningful relationships with people around us with the idea that they're instantly going to be, these life-changing things. And so what I would say is, like, on your job, just as you expect gradual growth, gradual improvement, that's the same thing with these kinds of relationships as well. If you are coming every day ready to show up and invest over time, it will happen. I don't know what time is, but what I can say is I am friends and best friends, actually, with folks that I worked with back in 2005. They're some of my best friends today. Those relationships span and like explode beyond work environments. And that's the win, right? When we are being and not just doing, we make friendships and connections that last beyond the walls of the work building. And that's when like life really happens. That's when life happens. And that's when you get into the conversations of being able to share your faith. That's when you get into the conversations of being able to really do life with each other. It's over time, beyond the walls of the work building.
It's so good. I love that. And just to close this out is like, just because you love and you put yourself and you're vulnerable and you love others, doesn't mean it's always going to be reflected back to you.
That's right. And you don't do it for that.
You don't do it for that.
You don't do it for you do it because that's the work that God called us to. And I think that's where Christians get it wrong, if I'm being really honest with you. I think Christians are the weirdos in the office, to be quite honest, because yeah, I know.
Okay. Yeah.
I know.
It's so true.
It is true, because oftentimes
real.
What I see happen is Christians come in, and we come in with this idea of being like these foot soldiers that are going to win everybody to Christ. And the problem with that is it's not genuine. It's not authentic. It's not how relationships are built. It's not the process. The process is being. The process is relationship. The process is doing life with people in genuine, authentic ways. And so what I would say is, like, don't be weird. Don't be weird. Just
don't be
yourself.
weird, and don't be a victim.
That's
like
right.
I see that too with Christians. Is like, I can't share my faith in the workplace. I can't, they're well, good. Like that's not the point.
That's right. Or I can't share because everybody's so different than me.
Yes.
And my response to that would be, yeah. Everywhere you go, there are people different than you, but you don't stand in the line at the grocery store quoting scripture. You don't do that on the baseball field at your kid's game.
A true story. I was in Trader Joe's the other day, and I hear this person quoting scripture. I turn around, and it's Danielle.
Oh my God!
She's sitting there. I'm just kidding, but no, it's so good. I'll tell you what. Like, I wish we could just keep going, and I would tell people, like, hey, we're going to stop here if you want to watch more of this. But I think there's going to be. You didn't even get into like some of the stuff that we talked about the other day. I thought was so good. But I just want to say, thank you for, inviting us in to live differently, to see people differently, to embrace people differently. Thank you for doing it and being an example. That's why I love it so much, because your wisdom comes from experience, and you've seen that, and you've been on both sides of it. And so we're just so thankful for you, and I'm thankful for you personally, pushing me, challenging me, and pushing us to be better.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I'm always learning from Danielle. One of the things I'm always inspired by Danielle is just to live differently, right? To engage with people differently, to be more empathetic, to be more understanding of people's stories, which always helps me in this regard. It always helps me to see them as God sees them. I mean, can you imagine if we all started there, right? And this isn't original to myself or Danielle. It is actually who Jesus calls us to be. It is who Jesus was, right? Jesus didn't go around shaming people and guilting people and telling people just to get along, blah, blah, blah. No, he demonstrated love. And in fact, to the greatest degree, through the giving of his life for you and for me, right? And so there's a couple of scriptures I want to read to you that really inspire us and help us to live better. And we can use these even like through the lens of the workplace, right? And the one is in Matthew chapter 22, and it says, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Wow, that's good, right? This is the first and greatest commandment. And then he said the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Isn't it crazy? You can determine your love for God by how you love your neighbor, by how you love your coworker. It's almost impossible to say, well, I love God. I believe in God. I follow Jesus and Jesus, everything. But you hate your coworker? They don't work together. They just can't. They can't reside in the same heart, can they? Right? Love and hate cannot live together. And so love is a choice. Love isn't always a feeling, right? Love is a choice I have to make every single day. I love Matthew 20. It says this, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be the first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. He showed us the greatest way to love, right? And look, here's some just a few more thoughts before we close. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John mean the good news for all people, right? There's 4 Gospels, 4 books in the New Testament, which are basically stories of Jesus' life, narratives of his life that describe over 40 encounters of stories where he had meaningful connections with various people. In 9 of these, Jesus initiated the conversations. He initiated the encounters, right? There was these divine interactions. In 25, the individuals did, right? Jesus was available and took time for each person, right? The others were a third party bringing a person to Jesus. So Jesus didn't ignore people. When they engaged him, he would engage with them. He would see them. He would embrace them. He would be present. When we see Jesus, we often begin with questions. We see Jesus meet the physical needs or speak to the hurting places before anything else, right? Like that's the way of Jesus. I'm going to close with this as we're giving this out today in person. And I know maybe you can't receive this, but this is a little Love Local card. Start where you live. And it says, gives you a little space on the back. And here's what I want you to do. Find a little piece of paper. Maybe this is on your phone, something. I want you to write down one name that God is bringing to your mind that you can be more intentional to, that you can listen, that you can understand, that you can love and serve. As you listen to this song, I want you to think about that. I want you to kind of engage with God on this. And please don't tune out. Don't say, oh, I'm done with the message, it's over. It's like, no. What does God want to do? Make space to hear the voice of God. And write this down and then obey, right? Make the action. So listen to this song.
Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Great is your faithfulness.